Будемо продовжувати робочий день.
We continue our working day at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and the topic is police efficiency and citizens' rights, finding a balance within the legislation. Our guests are Mustafa Nayyem, People's Deputy of Ukraine, member of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Alexander Vatyuk, lead office Vladimir Zhidenko, head of the legal department at the National Police of Ukraine, Anton Gerashchenko, MP, member of the Committee on Legal Support of Law Enforcement. Also, Boris Malyshev, Associate Professor of Theory and History of State and Law at Taras Shevchenko University. And also he is an expert at RPR. And Mykola Gavrilyuk, Professor of Criminal Law and Criminology at Taras Shevchenko National University, board member of the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. Yevgen Krapivin, expert at the Police is Under Control, Association of Ukrainian Monitors of Human Rights and Law Enforcement. Dear colleagues, I remind that we have 1.5 hours. Please speak slowly because we have simultaneous translation into English. And I give the floor to Mustafa. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Firstly, thank you for coming. Thank you for this interest to this topic. We start this discussion. You know that we have problems with communication concerning the legislation on law enforcement, and we worked with our colleagues and created lead office platform that is the office to support the reform of law enforcement bodies, especially police. We want to create a dialogue and to support reforms and to do it independently. We organized this office with Mr. Vlasyuk and the colleagues that are present here today. They are human rights advocates or law enforcers. We understand that the processes that are going on in the national police for the last 2 years, they are fast, and the legislation and law enforcers cannot fill these gaps at such high rate. And in this sense, without the dialogue, without trying to understand each other, there will be some sort of confrontation. That's why we want to be a moderator in this process, and we would like to initiate new legislative initiatives concerning legal acts and strategic documents. We are thankful to National Police who also joined this initiative, and we will be developing in the framework of our platform as a think tank, not a structure of National Police. And today we start discussion. You know that recent events brought such things that some initiatives were created to broaden or to narrow the responsibility of law enforcers, to increase responsibility for violations in relation to police and the alternative draft laws that were provided, and we will discuss it. We are going to speak about it now. I give the floor to Mr. Vlasyuk, who is the representative of our office, and then we will discuss these initiatives. Vladislav Vlasyuk, representative of the lead office, is given the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you to be involved. And this is a process of creation of the new police, and that should be our joint effort. And the new police should be built by everyone together, and together with Mustafa and other colleagues, and we thank them for that. We came out with an idea to create a think tank that will help National Police and also maybe other law enforcement bodies with such important work. And we want to be a moderator in the process and the creator of some important legislation that should be introduced in the system of national police. Previously, I served in national police and patrol police, and I launched the work of the traffic police, and also Mustafa knows the system, and he knows some important things about it and can promote these laws, and we joined our efforts, and this is the professional office of lead office, it is called, and we propose this organization as a think tank, as a platform in order to help police. We hope that we will help police to work better for the benefit of society. As of today, we initiated this discussion. This is an open discussion, fair discussion. Head of Legal Department, Vladimir Zhidenko, we welcome him here. He will present legislative initiatives creating basis for discussion. What legislative initiatives are lacking for effective work of police? He will explain what is meant by this and why it is needed. Also, advocates, campaigners will be able to express their concerns connected with the broadening or narrowing the responsibilities of police officers, and I hope that our platform will be ground for expert discussions, and we are ready for cooperation with other stakeholders, NGOs, and expert centers and associations. We are ready to efficiently and work in order to provide help to police and to society to achieve good results, to form better law enforcement bodies, better police. Vladimir Zhidenko is given the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here, and I'm glad that this platform is created because it is important also not only for police but for also the Ministry of Internal Affairs and for other stakeholders, and we hope that this will help us to defend the rights of citizens better, not only the rights of policemen, because many journalists focus on this. In order police to work better, we should provide it with the instruments, with means. We understand that the Constitution of Ukraine and Article 19 provide the rights to police officers that they should adhere to the law, and those gaps in legislation, they do not give the opportunity to police officers to defend the rights of citizens as they should. So what initiatives in the legal sphere will be submitted to Supreme Council, and we hope that they will be supported by the deputies. Firstly, these are changes to the code on administrative violations, on traffic movement, and on national police. What we want to introduce to the Code of Ukraine of administrative violations. Firstly, we want to strengthen the responsibility of citizens for leaving the place of traffic accident, and want to broaden the sanctions and even to deprive the drivers of their license because of this. This is done in order that the person who committed this crime, he should understand that if he leaves the traffic accident site, he can be deprived of his traffic card. So then, if some administrative violations are made, there can be administrative arrest up to 24 hours. So we wanted to be for those administrative violations if the sanction envisages administrative arrest and if the person is under the influence and can do harm to himself or to others. So it is done because we have bad statistics on household violence, and more than 65,000 administrative protocols were made because of family violence. And why it is so? Because police officers arrive at site of so-called household violence. They take this citizen that is under alcohol influence who beats his wife, and for 3 hours they can take him to police department, and then in 3 hours he is back at home, and repeated violations are made. And they are even more fierce and with bad consequences. And in order to take this person and detain him for more time, and police officers should be able to bring this case to court, because it's difficult to find a judge at night in order to provide this in the legal sphere. So we want to improve the system of temporary detention of the vehicle if it prevents the movement of other vehicles. So this norm does not envisage the situations in which this vehicle can be evacuated from the site where it is. And it is done.
This is done in order to let all the citizens clearly understand that if they leave their vehicles unattended in prohibited venues, they will be evacuated to the special places beyond the city. And for the drunk drivers, we would like to introduce a provision that they could be arrested without detained by the policeman in order to prove that this person is drunk or under drug influence, and because when at night time police officers stop such drivers who are drunk or who are under drunk influence, they cannot detain such people, and they cannot deprive them from their driver's license. They have to find 2 witnesses, which at night time is almost impossible. Then we would like one more novelty. We would like to improve the system of showing ideas to the policeman, to a policeman, in line with our current rules. A citizen, when he is stopped in his vehicle by a police man, he does not handle his driver's license or other ideas to this policeman. He simply shows it, not given into hands, which is inconvenient for policemen to then when another novelty that a passenger should not leave the vehicle when he is stopped by a policeman. This was about the law about traffic rules. Now about the law about national police. We suggest the following amendments that actually the essence of the novelty which we suggest is to ensure the right of a policeman to stop any offense which he or she witnesses, irrespectively whether this policeman is in uniform or in the office at this very moment, or he is in his private life situation. Also, the law states that the police officer has to show his police ID or card or badge, and in a form which is noticeable to the interlocutor. The next is a clear signs which would be worn by special forces officers and which will allow to identify immediately these officers at a first glance. Besides that, we introduce we improve the system of applying special means by police forces. Here we mean the rules how the handcuffs could be used instead of guns, because when a policeman uses handcuffs instead of a gun, of course the effect is much easier. The next novelty is dealing with the situation when a policeman stops a person, stops a driver who obviously is drunk. The policeman, in this case, the policeman could arrest or detain this or seize this vehicle. Why we have introduced this novelty? Quite often people inform us when drunk drivers, obviously drunk drivers, take a car and go somewhere, and people inform us about these cars. In order to be able to stop this vehicle and to prevent it from further trip, we should be able to stop it and to seize. Another novelty in this law is dealing about the term of storage, period of storage for recorded materials, recorded proofs, evidences. Also, there was quite much information that police wishes to impose a ban on video taping of policemen. So we decided to introduce a special provision allowing citizens to video record the policemen in course of carrying out their responsibilities, except for very special cases which are clearly stated in the law. Thank you very much. We have Volodymyr Zdanka. Please do not speak very quickly. And now I invite to the microphone Mr. Gerashenko. First of all, I would like to thank to Mr. Zdanka, head of the Law Provision Department of the National Police. I'm very grateful for all those amendments that they drafted. Very soon these amendments will be submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers. I would like to state that all those amendments are aimed at the same purpose, strengthening security of the policemen and citizens. Of course, this was triggered by that tragedy which happened in Dnipropetrovsk, where two young policemen, a man and a woman, were killed by a driver who was stopped by them because he violated the traffic rules. This clearly showed that the policemen are not sufficiently protected. That's quite often when drivers are stopped, they leave a car, they approach to the policemen, start to convince them to argue and dispute, and unfortunately that's very dangerous, like it was shown in the Dnipro city. And so the person who is stopped by a policeman should not argue, should not dispute with the policeman, especially when there is a traffic police. And so when such a driver is stopped by a policeman, a person should not leave a car, should not dispute, should not negotiate. They should listen to the policeman and not leave in the car, and behave in line with this law. Thank you, Anton, and now we give the floor to Mr. Mykola Havranyuk. Good morning, dear friends. I would like to comment on the novelties which we discussed today. The responsibility for leaving the road accident place. I do not wish to describe this as some very terrible novelty deteriorating the human rights of people. Actually, in the criminal code, there is already criminal responsibility for leaving the place of road accident. Also, you may see that there is the right to administrative detention up to 24 hours for home violence, in case of home violence. By the way, in the administrative code, we already have an arrest for hooliganism, which could be applied from 1 to 20 to 14 days. And I agree with many novelties, except potentially difficult ones, about the absence of two witnesses to a detention of a drunk driver at night time. We understand why that very provision in our legislation appeared. Under previous regimes, the police officers quite often stopped people whom they did not like and lied that people were drunk when driving. In order to pass this amendment, we have to introduce some precautions. For example, the proof that such a person was drunk should be at night time should be confirmed by a medical certificate, for example. Also, the provision about documents, about driver's licenses, appeared when police officers simply destroyed the driver's license of a person and then said that that person had no driver's license. Maybe the provision should exchange with the idea. Some of those provisions, of course, they potentially may have impact on the civil freedoms. Of course, I do not wish to say that we should oppose the use of handcuffs, the use of the use of raisin bullets, etc. But I would like to point out to the legislation which is rather developed about the right to sufficient, the need to sufficient defense. When a year ago a passenger was killed, some people try to present it as the killing of an offender, of a criminal, but and this was proved. The correctness of the policeman behavior was proved because they had to prevent violence against other numerous people around. Exaggeration or of power or abuse of authority should be kept in mind in two times, or in two cases when it results in a death of an offender or in tough injuries. In this case, the policeman would be more attentive. The more rights we give to the policeman, the more responsibilities we should add to them. Here, I mean disciplinary responsibility. So we have to introduce disciplinary responsibility for abuse of power or for the exaggeration of power. And such disciplinary panels should include representatives of broad public. Thank you, Mykola. I invite Boris Malyshev. I agree with Mykola Ivanovich, who described all positive sides of those novelties. As a person who is involved into human rights protection in course of police interaction. So when we try to remove the necessity to present to witnesses when people are detained at night, to witnesses that a person is drunk, and we should think twice, should think carefully about this norm. And the law about national police and the ways how force could be, and the cases how force could be applied. Even if we develop the current articles about application of force, even in current legislation, even if we make the law provisions even more detailed, they won't be this won't change the situation, because even now the law formulates everything quite clear, but everything depends on how a policeman assess current situation. So any use of the raising sticks, handcuffs, etc., police should coordinate with the danger of the offense which this policeman tried to stop. So the main key that that the policemen do not abuse their power and do not do not exaggerate their authority when they apply force, is rooted in proper training of policemen. Currently, we do not know the exact wording, the exact language, how those ideas which we discussed today will be reflected in the legislation. That's very important, because some aspects which we described today, they are potentially dangerous, and I understand that they are aimed at protection of society, of better protection of people and better protection of policemen. But more specifically, we will be able seeing the exact text. Thank you, Boris. I invite Yevgen Kaplin. Good morning. I agree with what was mentioned by Boris, by Mykola Ivanovich. I only would like to add two statements. The first is about legislation in general. The novelties which we heard today are interesting. Of course, it's better to see the text. The period of administrative detention is extended, but I have doubts that it will be approved by broad public. What is important is that any practice of introducing amendments to the current legislation by national police, it should be improved. Currently, on the website of the National Police, from winter, we see the draft law about special rooms for temporary detention or temporary arrest, but it is not improved, it is not amended as the broad public recommends. There are some draft laws which you can see in parallel with that major version offered by the national police, but they are not compiled together. So my message is, when draft laws appear after some very loudly known events, like the amendments which we discussed today, these are the only which gain most attention from national. When there are scandalous events, they could be used as the real measure for the efficiency of our police. When we speak about amendments to legislation, it is existent irrespectively of scandalous events. There are multi-level checks, the railway stations, the efficiency of the police, assessment of the efficiency of police work. Actually, there are some things that are not reformed in national police, and the legislation which is not improved. This should be reviewed on site and changed in legislation. Boris mentioned professional training. This is one of the elements. The use of special means of firearms, of etc., is regulated by the law, but the policemen should be trained. Sometimes the policemen do not warn people that they will use firearms, etc. This is because the policemen lack manuals about situations in which they should apply definite means, the proper application of those means. The documents which are not laws, which are not by laws, but these are routine instructions. They should be produced at the level of police. The standard operational procedures should be developed, and they should deal with the application of special means, the procedure of person's ID, the situation of temporary arrest, the situation of home violence. For all these cases, the policeman should have clear instruction how to act. Unfortunately, patrol officers do not know how to approach to all these situations. So my message is to move not only in direction of legislative changes, but to produce such procedural documents about enforcement of this or that law provisions in practice. Vladimir Шляк. Vladimir Zhdenko. First of all, thank you very much for your recommendations. Such discussion is very precious. About leaving the place of a road accident, the sanctions currently provide for public labor or detention up to 15 days. But this article currently does not allow to deprive this person from the driver's license. I think that deprivation from the right to drive a car from the driver's license is more efficient than all those means. About administrative detention up to 24 hours for home violence. This was not about arrest, this was temporary detention. About the right of a policeman about the abuse of rights by a policeman. New version of the office statute of the National Police is now under registration in the Ministry of Justice. And it sets clear rules for disciplinary investigation, for disciplinary proceedings, and it sets the rules for participation of disciplinary panels, which should comprise representatives of broad public. Then about the court, the burden of proof in court when a person is detained drunk when driving of course will be later supported by medical evidences. As for training, I fully agree with all the speakers and say that training is one of the primarily aspects in the policeman work. Actually, training is carried out continuously. A lot of policemen undergo training all the time in different aspects. Now about tearing driver's license. Now it's possible. I will give the floor to Mustafa Nayam and then to Gerashim.
Firstly, we won't stop this discussion, and what is said now will be reflected. I see many problems. National So they introduce some changes that are not balanced concerning the rights of the citizens. They defend police officers, and sometimes the defense of the citizens is lacking. So as to increase of responsibility for non-following police office orders. So we won't introduce the punishment because we know that there is such provision in legislation that if a person interferes in the work of the policeman, there is punishment for this in legislation. We should increase the punishment for not following the orders of police officer. It will be from 15 to 30 minimal payments, and if it is done repeatedly, there will be more to pay. So we also propose to introduce in this draft law in all identifications we want to include that this is a European norm. This is not just person. So the person should follow the orders, the legal orders, and if the orders of police officer are not legal, outside legal actions, so a person should not follow. So this norm, we discussed this norm with our colleagues, and we want to say that we want to introduce such a thing that in the framework of responsibilities, and it should not contradict current legislation. So the actions of the police officer should not contradict current legislation, and if the court establishes that the actions were not legal, the person who didn't follow the orders of the police officer will have positive verdict. So we review this with Igor Lutsenko. He introduced his own draft law that is balancing, and we decided to balance it like this. I don't know whether police will like it, but I believe that advocates and lawyers like it. So also swearing is also should be punishable, and that should be noted separately. Not only like some minor hooliganism, but it should be clearly stated in the documents, and this will show that this is a balanced law, and I propose that it should be not just a single discussion. We should have more discussions, because a lot of things that are proposed, people support a lot of norms, but there is vacuum in information space, there is no balancing. That's why issues may arise in the parliament and in society. Anton Gerashchenko. There were some cases, and they tore IDs of patrol traffic police officers, but these police officers were mostly involved in corruption. And we now create new police. 16,000 young people were hired. They are vetted, they are checked, and they underwent proper training. Of course, there are some cases of violation, and if the violations are minor, they have some reprimands, and if they made some grave violations, they will be brought to criminal responsibility. But there is another problem. For example, 3 a.m. and a car is stopped in the street, and at 3 in the morning, maybe no other car goes, and there is a video footage. Then this person is brought for tests, and in the presence of the specialist, everything, the documents are completed. So our police officers do not extort money for driving under the influence. So we create new police, and citizens should go up to the level of the new police. So if a police officer required a document, you should present it. And if you disagree, you should write a complaint. And there is a video footage. And in many cases, what is shown in the video and what the person says do not coincide. So at the moment of detention, the police cannot demand the court to review the case because, for example, a person is detained, someone should take decision on this, and there is no judge. For example, this is a holiday or it is done at night, and the person goes home and continues his actions. So we should raise this issue and discuss it with judges, that there should be judges that are on duty at that time. So as a former policeman and a friend of those patrol policemen who are now serving in patrol police, I would like to tell you on that behalf that you should hear them, those police officers who honestly serve, and you should hear them, and we try to do this. So those who work every day, they deal with the citizens who violate some laws, or just citizens who do everything correctly. So they deal with different people, and all responsibilities of police officers, it should be assessed not only how it influences the citizens, but also do they have proper means to work with the violators. So we should know the opinion of patrol policemen. They work honestly daily, and they realize the norms, and they defend us from offenders. So do you have some other comments, Nicola? When we discuss the issues concerning the presumption of rightfulness of the police officer. So if, for example, a person is detained by police, the driver is detained because there is provision in the legislation to do this. So I am a regular citizen, and I will always adhere to all requirements of the police officer. For example, to put my hands on the wheel of the car, for example, not to come out of the car, or to, for example, give him a driver's license, because it doesn't infringe my rights as a citizen. But if a police officer demand, and I feel that they start to limit my rights and my freedom, there is some feeling in me that this is not correct. If a police officer, for example, put handcuffs or spray something at me, so I should see where the rights are violated. And if I am a citizen who adheres to the law, I should meet all the legal requirements of the police officer. And we should clearly understand that among people concerning whom police officer, if he demands something, so this can be legal or not legal. But we should take into account the issues of security. So we should not infringe safety of police officers. We should help them to realize their responsibilities.
My colleague actually said that he complies with the traffic rules and complies with all the requirements of a police officer, but he won't be happy and feel himself abused when he will be put on handcuffs. Unfortunately, quite often people provoke policemen. Then they make video footage and post it in the internet in order to raise discussion about the abuses committed by policemen. And I advise ordinary citizens not to counteract to policemen when they simply ask you to show your ID. Just simply show your ID and that's it. I agree with what Anton said, that compliant citizens have no problems with police. Today we have the only thing which we like to improve the legislation is that today we have one Minister of Interior, we have one Chief of the National Police. Tomorrow we will have different people at power, and we would like to prevent a situation which was under Yanukovych regime when Automaidan participants traveled to Mezhigiria, and then they were deprived from their driver's licenses. So my suggestion is, let us sit together and discuss all those issues. I understand that there are many decisions made by the national police. They are adequate, they are compliant, they are correct. But unfortunately, quite often there is lack of communication and discussion. Because when police tried to respond to a murder in the Dnipro city, and tried to draft the legislation, preventive legislation to prevent such cases, immediately human rights activists started to speak about the police type state, which is absolutely incorrect. So let us create a platform to discuss all those issues. I am eager to offer my committee in the parliament for this discussion, or in the national police. I would be happy. Now questions. I represent here Ukrainian monitors on human rights. I agree with you that human rights activists, I agree with the policemen, but today we do not have efficiently investigation mechanism. The investigation inside police is not independent and is not efficient. Quite often they do not confirm the abuse of human rights inside the police. The state Intelligence Bureau, the State Investigations Bureau remains inactive. So I suggest that we should involve public to such investigations. Unfortunately, as of today, when there is investigation carried out inside police, we do not know what is done, how it's done, etc. So the police should present clear report about investigation. Okay. Not to forget about your suggestions. If you have some specific initiatives, let us agree to meet and to discuss what could be done, what pieces of legislation could be formulated. As far as I know, that the investigations are carried out, but the system does not provide for any openness. As of now, we are reforming the internal investigations department. Let us, at this very stage, introduce some procedural changes, improve the procedure, and let us do this together. I would like to add a couple of words. We heard that currently the disciplinary statute of the National Police is currently at the stage of passage, and I believe that all the issues that you mentioned should be reflected in that procedural statute. There we could provide that the disciplinary committee should comprise 2 representatives of the national police and 3 representatives of broad public. As for the National Investigations Bureau, the idea was put forward about investigations of law enforcers' actions with tortures. So, and unfortunately, that provision about abuse of power up to tortures unfortunately disappeared in final version of the law. So we should be very careful when looking at all those issues. The issue is that involvement of broad public, involvement of more transparency could be done at the stage of passage of that national disciplinary statute. In the law on national police, there is an article of declarative nature stating that the territorial police board should promote involvement of public representatives to review of complaints. Unfortunately, as of now, there is no properly described procedures, and now there is done on discretion of the local authorities. That's why I believe that this is the right and proper moment when we can shape up this procedure. I would like to add to the discussion. Of course, the procedure, the mechanism that you mentioned should be first created, and at later stage we will speak about complaints. As of the moment, people simply do not know where to submit their complaints and about what to submit their complaints. So let us produce the disciplinary statute first and then speak about complaints in relation to that statute. Also, I would like to mention about criminal responsibility. When we look at the criminal statistics, we will clearly see the problem of tortures. We have Article 137 of the Criminal Code, which provides for punishment for tortures. We have also the article about abuse of power with the use of violence, but we do not see many sentences related to those articles. And when we look at the article about unlawful detention or unlawful arrest, we will clearly see that it is not applied almost at all, because there are less than 10 cases in line with that article. So when we speak about criminal responsibility of the police officers, we should comprehensively change the criminal code on the one side and create a body which would investigate those cases of police abuse specifically. The crimes committed by police officers are not investigated and remain unpunished. Prava TV channel. My question to Mustafa Nayem. Please explain about the draft law, whether there is one version or there is alternative version, two versions, the alternative by Yuri Lutsenko, and when it will go to the plenary room. And about the investigations, as far as I know, the investigators are overloaded. And the question, this is the question about human resources for investigators department. And the third aspect, what is the interrelation between the national police work and involvement of public? The alternative draft law exists. This is not Yuri Lutsenko, but Igor Lutsenko, who is author of this law. We coordinated both versions. I believe that we will repeal both our draft laws and will submit one joint draft law. Now about investigations. Thank you for your question about that numerous attestations that we had. We have a huge shortage in staff in the regions, in the capital city, and even in patrol police. Fortunately, in 11 regions, we announced the vacancy filling campaigns, and currently this campaign is approaching to its end, and very soon we will have sufficient numbers of the policemen. Also, I would like to prevent your question that the majority of police, the majority of staff is based on the previous militia. I could assure you that that's not true. After this latest vacancy filling campaign, we have the majority of people who had no previous experience in the militia. Also, currently, we work on the draft law on criminal offenses, which will considerably improve the situation with investigation of criminal deeds, criminal offenses, and this will considerably cut down the load of investigators and some category of offenses which will be categorized as criminal offenses. They will be investigated in line with a simplified procedure. The next question. I'm Mikhaila Kamenev, NGO Human Rights Protection Initiative. I used to be the patrol police officer. This is a question about temporary detention for 24 hours. Why do you think that this is useful to bring perpetrator to the court? I would like to draw attention to the ombudsman decision saying that when a person is detained immediately and there is human rights court decision that this is illegal, and in the light of that decision of the European Court on Human Rights, maybe it's more productive not to extend the time, but to bring this person to the court. Why do you need more time to? I will quote again the amendment which we suggest. The article reads as follows: the administrative detention of a perpetrator who committed the administrative offense could last not more than 3 hours. But if the administrative offense provides for a fine, or when a person is under influence of alcoholic or drugs addiction, this which is dangerous for the surrounding people, then this person could be detained for 24 hours. If a person is in a situation of when this person is drunk and dangerous for the surrounding people, then we could detain this person for 24 hours and anyway, the case would go to court. When there is a case of home violence and a drunk man is beating his wife, the petrol police detains this drunk man, for example, at night or late evening, then this person who is liberated within 3 hours, he comes back home after 3 hours and commits a new offense, starts to beat his wife again, and she calls for a police repeatedly within the same night.
1+1 Загородній. Mustafa, tell us please about the procedures in the new law, and maybe you should go into more detail. You know that in the United States, the driver should put his hands on the wheel of the car, or, for example, to leave the car at the request of police officer. Maybe it should be envisaged in the bylaws. So every action should be explained and envisaged in the law. So maybe you should write it in the law, because that someone do not obey the orders. Of course, people understand the law differently, and you should put all the necessary actions in the law. And you said that 8 minimum salaries is defined, but this is not correct practice because it promotes corruption. For example, I can detain you for 3 hours or for 24 hours. Maybe you should clearly state it in the law. If someone took off the chevrons of police officer, or for example, split on him. So this is a draft law, and maybe Vladimir will comment on this, but the matter is we can't include everything in the law. It will be in the bylaws, but the main thing, this is about culture. If a person is stopped, in any case, we can put it in the law where they should stop, but so there should be separate bylaws on this, and we will promote this. There should be campaign. We should tell the people, because if there is contradiction in legislation, this can happen, and minimum term, for example, this should be reviewed by judge, law enforcers. So we start this work. This is only the beginning. We never trusted police officers. We were from the other side, and now they say those who trust in them, who follow, who adhere to the law, why they should suffer because some people do not provide IDs to police officers, or they do not stop. So this should be done, and we should carry out information campaigns on this, and maybe there should be some videos, some maybe campaigns, information campaigns in schools. For example, you can provide a document through the window and say that the police officer violated some legislation. So now we establish it in the law that this is done like this, and this is not because we want to violate someone's rights, but because this provides security for both police officer and the citizen. For example, at night, all the windows are opaque. So when a person provides the document, it's easier in this way. This is all clearly stated in law. Thank you for your question. What I want to say is that now we are our new police is only here for 1 year, and all regulations are improved, and we see what changes should be made in legislation, and we should maybe we can specify these provisions in more detail, but it doesn't mean that we should increase the fines. The matter is that in our draft law that was developed by the ministry, the national police, the deputies, we try to establish responsibility, for example, for leaving the site of traffic accident. This is not the increase of fine and additional responsibility for there is no increase in fines. Instead of a public service, and there is the person will be deprived of his driving certificate. And as to going into more detail about the actions of the police officer, and this will be envisaged in the draft law that is prepared by Mustafa with his colleagues, and we will work on this draft law, and we will take into account your proposals that you provide now. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues. We end our press briefing. Till the next time. Goodbye.
Шановні колеги, наступна подія буквально за 5 хвилин.
The next event is